And did you guys ever hear about the whole section that they wrote in the game about Joel having a girlfriend? Did you ever hear that? But basically, for The Last of Us Part 2, one of the things that makes Naughty Dog so unique and so special is that they will have like a really cool section of the game and they'll just cut it. They'll just cut it all because they, I guess, just decide that it's not working. And one of the things that they originally had in The Last of Us Part 2 that got cut was that Joel was actually going to have a whole segment where he has basically a girlfriend, somebody that he's close to. And they ended up just cutting her from the game entirely because they just didn't think it worked, and they felt like it was going to be too much to ask the player to fall in love with or to care about so many new characters all at once. They're like, let's just keep it lean. Let's just keep it lean. So what this is specifically is, this is reported by Den of Geek, but it's based on some interviews that happened. Druckmann and Gross, the two lead writers for The Last of Us Part 2, they said, quote, for more than 50% of the production, The Last of Us Part 2 had a much different, much darker ending. Originally, the game also sent Ellie on a mission to the Seraphite Island, but the level was eventually cut because, quote, it didn't move her story along narratively, end quote, according to Gross in a new interview with the Washington Post about the content that didn't make it into the final game. This, I think, is why it feels so kind of abrupt. You'll be playing with Ellie. You get to the aquarium and then the game just kind of pauses for her. It just kind of stops. I think that's, this is why I think it does just come out of nowhere. Let's see. There we go. We have them stacked. So I think that's it. But the biggest cut of all may have been one that allowed players to meet Joel's long-distance girlfriend, Esther, who, in an earlier version of the story, lived, quote, in a town 2 hours away from Jackson. Joel. According to the news outlet, we would have met Esther in a flashback, quote, roughly 6 or 7 hours into the game, end quote. It was an earlier version of the flashback in the game where Tommy teaches Ellie how to use the sniper rifle and Joel and Ellie go searching for strings for her guitar. So essentially they would have, what they ended up replacing it with, this was originally you were going to ride to check on Esther, but instead they swapped it out for you going and helping Ellie replace the strings on her guitar. And then it's like this little like tidbit where they anyway, well, moving on. Let's see, quote, I think she lived out by the dams, by the electric dams, and they kind of had a commuter relationship, and Joel and Ellie were headed out there and saw that the building had been taken over by infected, Gross said, of Joel's ill-fated relationship with Esther, who would have died in the flashback. When Joel and Ellie found Esther in the flashback, they would have discovered she had been bitten and, quote, knew she was going to die, end quote. Joel would have asked Ellie to quickly fetch water from a nearby river, and when Ellie reached the river, she would have heard a gunshot. And you don't know whether Esther killed herself or if Joel put a bullet in her head, but you know that this was going to happen. The two adults were making a decision, and they were going to try and protect Ellie from it as much as they could. The event would have triggered a conversation between Joel and Ellie that would have addressed the elephant in the room, how Ellie's immunity and the cure the Fireflies had hoped to develop from the cordyceps fungus in her brain, a procedure that would have killed her in the first game, could have saved people like Esther, but this scene wasn't meant to be. They go on, the reason it got scrapped was because we just didn't have the time to establish Esther, she said, noting that players wouldn't have spent enough time with Esther to make her death really resonate. That said, some traces of Joel's history with Esther remained in the game until the very late stages before it was cut. Even up until towards the end of the game, we had like a love letter from Esther in his house. Esther was actually first introduced during a live performance of some of the scenes from The Last of Us called One Night Live, featuring Troy Baker as Joel, Ashley Johnson as Ellie, and the performance included a never-before-seen epilogue to the first game. It's almost exactly like the scene you see at the start of the sequel where Joel plays his guitar for Ellie. The original scene mentioned Esther, though. And if you've never seen this, you should look it up. But it's basically like... It's a little weird. They reenact scenes from the game, but it's the voice actors playing it.
Funny articles, but
it's a little weird.
stay here.
This is so stupid. We would have more of a fucking chance if you just let me help.
I am.
But it's fun. It's fun. My entire YouTube algorithm is just Harry Potter now. Sorry, not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. I mean, it's probably worse things it could be. But thank you for the 2. Yeah, it's a little weird. Like, you know, it's kind of stilted and like it's a little weird, but it's cool. There's really good music, and they play this through, and you get to see these scenes with characters. Even like this epilogue scene, where you get to see stuff that wasn't originally there. Wonder if this is it. I can't go.
I wasn't alone.
I can't go full screen. Sorry.
My best friend was there, and
spoilers, Ellie.
Honey, none of that is on you.
no, that's... You don't understand.
I struggled for a long time with surviving. And no matter what, you keep finding something.
Just swear to me.
What?
Swear to me that everything you said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
Liar. And then... Sorry, Gustavo.
The sheer talent of...
Oh, Jeff. Jeff's always there. God. Leave me alone, Jeff. Leave me alone. Okay, well, I don't know where it is then, because it said it was in this clip and it's not, so I don't know what the deal is. But you should go check this out if you haven't seen it before. It's a decent hour of your time. But anyway, apparently they mentioned Esther in part of that I don't see. But Esther was not the only love interest who didn't appear in the game. This is what I was talking about, where it might be Dina in that episode, 6 of The Last of Us Season 1. Or it might be Kat. More likely it's Dina. But the reason it might be Kat is because Ellie mentions Kat in flashbacks and in her journal in The Last of Us Part 2. Kat is not only the woman who gave Ellie her tattoos, but her girlfriend at one point. One journal entry in the game describes how scared Ellie is of infecting Kat with the cordyceps fungus after they kiss for the first time. The game also includes a photo of Kat that you can find. Originally, players would have met Kat during the dance scene at the end of the game. Gross revealed that players would have had the option to have a sassy conversation with Kat before Ellie has her first kiss with Dina. Quote, "It was another thing that we cut because it wasn't progressing anything. It was just like, again, really cool world building, but that kissing scene also bounced around through the game a lot. We used it to open the whole thing with Ellie and Joel at the dance." So it makes sense why they trimmed it. Clocking in at about 30 hours, The Last of Us Part 2 story is a very long experience, so it's not surprising that not all scenes or characters written or filmed for it made the final product. Fortunately, we'll have the next few years to learn more about what could have been. So there's just tons of stuff like this, where they had whole plot points and branching narratives and like options for conversations, all this stuff that they just cut, because it just wasn't pacing properly. They just didn't feel like it worked. And that's the difference between, a Naughty Dog and one of these other studios, is that Naughty Dog will cut it, whereas a lot of other companies would just keep it, because they're like, well, we don't want to cut this thing that's been like really, it helps the gameplay time. It makes the game longer. We don't want to cut that. We don't want to do that. But Naughty Dog will, just because it doesn't really add anything. So like, if it doesn't add anything, then just get rid of it. The game's long enough. It's pretty cool. I do think that like remnants of these cuts can be seen and felt. Like, I still insist, like I said, that Ellie, her first half of the Last of Us Part 2 comes to an end very abruptly. And apparently it's because there was going to be a whole section where they got back and then go to the Seraphied Island at the same time Abby's going. But, you know, it's just... It is what it is. It is what it is. But I'll tell us. I think it still plays decently well. He took my thing!